Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Make Love Easy podcast. It is my honor, privilege, and pleasure to put in front of you Tyson Adams. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Lewis. Thanks for having me.
Man, I'll just start with where I landed in discovering you. Your post on porn resonated. I don't even know how we came to be friends. Probably either the algorithm or infinite intelligence, synchronicity, whatever. But it was such a crisp, elegant articulation of a really strong, clean, clear position in relation to porn and dealing with it as a man in the modern world. So thank you for who you are, and tell me your story, man. What brought you into men's work and taking aim at one of the greatest pieces of disempowerment for men in the world currently?
Yeah. So my story begins at 9. So I saw my first Playboy magazine. It was actually a Vanna White Playboy. When I was 9, I was just walking through a field with some friends. There was a board over the ground. I opened it up. There was a whole treasure trove of Playboys. We pulled them out, and I remember opening up this Playboy. And as soon as I saw, Vanna, I like hit the deck, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I knew in that moment I was not supposed to be seeing this, that this was not, that this was something that could get me in trouble effectively. And my mother loved watching Wheel of Fortune. And so it was just one of those things. And I had two thoughts in that moment. Of course, the first one is like, oh, wow, I could get in trouble. I need to make sure that nobody sees this. And number two, I'm coming back here tomorrow alone immediately. And that ultimately began this sort of quest for seeking pornography. um, my hometown in small town, Washington State is called Ephrata. We were the first town in America to get fiber wire put underground. So I went from no internet to high speed internet like that. There wasn't even that AOL dial up thing. And so when I was, let's say, I think about 11 and a half is when that popped. And there was a program called Kazaa, which was file sharing. I'm sure, do you remember that? Yeah.
Napster, yeah.
Yeah, Napster, very similar, LimeWire, that whole thing. And it was sort of what I call the lottery of porn because back then there was no thumbnails. You would just search something and then you would download it. It would be a file on your computer, causing all kinds of crashes in your device, of course. And I would just watch these things and I would watch them straight through. And, as I went through my own trauma trainings and became trained in IFS therapy, I began to see very clearly that those experiences were too much, too fast, too soon for my body, for where I was at developmentally, and they were really violent. It was a ton of really inappropriate things. And as I started to date, those images, those videos began being projected into the bedroom in the ways in which I would want my partners to act, to behave, to shave, you name it. And these things began to influence me and started to get involved in the bedroom. And when I left high school, I went to University of Washington in Seattle, and I joined a fraternity, which I didn't know what a fraternity was when I was a kid. But my girlfriend at the time, her brother was in one, so I just joined up. And as soon as I joined, I realized that the fraternity with 100 men living there had a porn library of thousands of videos indexed by porn star and genre. And we made this sort of running joke every night, get off the damn internet because we can't actually do our homework. The guys that were in positions of power were getting upset because literally it would crash the server and we literally couldn't use the internet because everybody was, looking at porn. And we even had a porn sort of chairman who was there to organize, like an elected position, unofficially elected position. So I grew up in the belly of the beast of that particular era. I'm 41, and so that was really the misogyny and the normalization of porn use, and it created, a lot of destruction. So that's really the beginning of this story for me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, don't leave us in such a cliffhanger. What had you come into empowerment with it? Like,
Mhm.
well, where did you realize it was a problem, and then how did you solve it for yourself?
Yeah, I didn't start doing personal development until I was 30. And ultimately, what led me to stopping porn was actually a medical emergency. So I had used a condom when I was living in Southeast Asia, and it set off pins and needles through my entire pelvic floor and created a tremendous amount of pain. And doctors in Bangkok and India and all over couldn't figure it out. They just pumped me with antibiotics, but it was not a bacterial infection. It was a chronic disorder that was actually a lineage burden from my grandmother. And so, in that pain of masturbation and ejaculation, I chose to do 30 days of no pornography. And that was the first time that I actually did that before it was trending on TikTok and before anybody was doing NoFap and all of these different semen retention things. I just did it because I had to. And in that experience of taking a pause, I learned two really big things that were really important. The first was that I was normalizing living at a quarter tank. So, in other words, because I'd been masturbating daily and regularly for 20 years, I had normalized basically having low energy levels. And all of a sudden, boom, now my energy levels were full tank. And I was very productive, very happy, very alive. And that was really, really just amazing. And then the second thing that I learned about myself was that I was running a cafe and a coffee roaster in the jungle. And there was tons of kids coming in and out. And it was an amazing time. But I realized that what pornography was doing to me was that it was having me assess every single female as a potential partner, from the youngest of little girls to the oldest of grandmothers. I was objectifying them and I was judging whether or not this would be a novel mate. And that was there was a lot of grief in that to realize that. But there was also this realization that I didn't feel safe in my own experience. I didn't feel safe being in those thought forms. And that was all porn programming that was creating me to be a particular way. So that was really the beginning of my healing journey. And then I went into therapy and psychedelics and then men's work and a number of things. But that was the beginning of it.
Respect, man. Uh, there's so much to touch on. You have what I take to be a grounded, well-rounded perspective on this, just in kind of the specificity of how you're articulating it. There's no demonization, there's no judgment, there's kind of a brute laying out of this is how it was warping and distorting my perception, my behavior, my experience.
Hmm.
And the activated, like awakened aliveness piece
Hmm.
is really intriguing and interesting to me because I've also experienced this. I've had uh, so I'll tell my story around this because
Please.
I'm in the journey a little bit.
Hmm.
Part of why I invite people into this podcast is like there's something I want to learn that I know will also benefit my audience
Hmm.
or something I want to explore. So I discovered porn. I was super Catholic. It was eighth grade on my grandpa's cable box. Now we weren't supposed to get channel 52, the Spice Channel,
Hmm.
but you were able to change the channel and see multicolored, like distorted, psychedelic looking kind of figures that somehow the information was coming into the cable box and then it would switch off and then you'd have to switch back and switch again.
Hmm.
And it was absurd. But that plus my grandmother's art books about the female form, which
Hmm.
were just one room over, really awakened sexual desire in me. And then there was the advent, as you mentioned, of like internet pornography. And then that was totally a flood. I mean, we talk about, I'm sure you've watched Gary Young's Great Porn Experiment.
Hmm.
Uh,
Oh, is it Young or is there a
maybe it's
second
Gary
different name?
Wilson.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
Wilson, something like that.
there it
Yeah.
is. Um, and so like just the overstimulation and
Hmm.
desensitization, like going back to a specific piece you pointed to, the activation of enhanced sexual salience, like an
Hmm.
obsessive, like, whoa, noticing. Like we know from the science of the male brain that there's a part of the occipital lobe that's actually dedicated to noticing if a woman is hot or not. Now,
Hmm.
the degree to which that becomes a kind of obsession and a stuck point rather than just a noticing like, oh, now I need to pour attention into that stimulus, I think varies from man to man. And I can hear the sort of compulsive hold it had over you. How do you think in general that porn distorts our relationship to the opposite sex?
Yeah. Well, there's been some studies done, which was back in the 2000s, and now we're 26 years later. And back then, they showed that 89% of porn had some form of non-consent or violence in it. And it's gotten more and more violent, and the genres have become more and more distorted, and the normalization of incest and all kinds of things. And so, what I think ultimately it does is it programs us to normalize violence and to create an arousal system that is rooted more so in adrenaline and dopamine, ultimately, than in serotonin, oxytocin, vasopressin, which would be a much more secure love-making experience. And so it's kind of it's wiring us into a sympathetic sexual charge effectively.
Huh. That's fascinating to me because there's clearly a range, right?
Mhm.
Oxytocin-driven sexuality allows for deepening of pleasure and sensual touch and nourishment of intimacy. And then dopamine-driven is about, novelty and variety. And we look at like the studies of sexual psychology in men, right? I've never met a man who only ever found one woman attractive,
Yeah,
who only found potential sexual responsiveness to one partner and one partner only. This is one of my arguments against like Christian monogamy and the Christian God. I'm like, if God wanted it that way, then he could have designed the system so that we're only liable for attraction to our person.
sure.
And so what I'm hearing in your articulation of it is it's like an imbalanced sexual range. It's like overpendulated in the direction of dopamine because
And
not
adrenaline, and
what's that?
adrenaline, and
And
adrenaline
adrenaline.
as well.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had never heard that connection. That's fascinating to me. And then there's an overactivation of that system, like the salience of those pathways and hunting for. Let me open a new tab. Let me watch a new video. Let me look for a new star.
Mhm.
Overwhelms and overshadows one's capacity for depth of intimacy. And here's my hypothesis. I'd love to hear what you think about it. Is that the reawakening and the rebalancing, like we put our attention focus capacity into that oxytocin, that deep intimacy range, this will diminish not only the compulsiveness, but like the presence uh of the hungry hunt. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? What do you
Yeah,
think?
absolutely. Yeah, that's when the arousal template kind of flip-flops and
Mm,
shifts. And having gone through that shift and, have secure functioning relationship, about to get married this summer, I can say it's worth it. Like all of the work to outgrow pornography for good is worth it because that puts us on the trajectory of when we say no to this, we're actually having radical hope, saying yes to this future that we're calling in.
mm,
And so, yeah. And one thing that's coming up for me right now is just, I've worked with, I don't even know, over 500 men at this point, one on one in context to this particular topic. And I'll give you sort of the flow of conversation that happens in that first initial connection call. And so, what I often start with is, a question, which is, did you have any sound elder masculine guidance in the area of sex and sexuality as you were coming of age and moving through puberty? And for 98% of the guys that I talk to, the answer is no. So then I follow it up with, okay, well, when did you first see porn? And so most men, in that 9 to 11 range, often around there. And then I say, okay, well, how long did you watch porn before you began, actually having intimate experiences with a real human? And for guys that are 40 plus, usually they were just watching or they just saw Playboys, hustlers, penthouses. And so they had sexual experiences pretty soon thereafter. But there are guys that are in their 30s or 20s where they went a decade or more without actually being with an intimate partner and watching just porn for that long before having an experience. And I've even worked with guys that have never had an intimate partner at all and they've only consumed pornography. And so I think what's really important is just to acknowledge that this is a epidemic. This is absolutely really, really super, super big. This is our deepest, darkest shadow as in the masculine form,
Mm.
from my opinion. And the way that I teach it is I basically say this. I say, okay, well, the way that these porn companies work is no different than social media. Like if things are free and you're scrolling, then you're being served ads. You click the ad, they get paid. Porn's similar, of course. Now there's OnlyFans and all kinds of things that you can subscribe to and have interactions, but ultimately they don't care about your age or your grade or your goals or your dreams or your religion or your nervous system or your future or your finances.
Mm.
They just see you as a means to an end, and that end is profit. And so the only sane thing to do, in my opinion, is to throw up the middle finger and to be like, fuck no. Like this is absolutely something that I must opt out of because these companies don't care. They're grooming us and they're traumatizing us and they're normalizing this. And ultimately they're profiting off of our ejaculations, like literally commercializing our orgasms. And so part of it is saying no, but then also turning to the little one inside, the young boy who, like you, innocently stumbled upon your grandfather's TV show, and same with me and every other man. When they tell their story, it's usually a fairly innocent story. And in the beginning, when they found porn, it's innocent, but over time we begin to have stresses in life. We get dumped, we get bullied, we moved homes, towns, somebody dies, we have a bunch of acne or whatever, and we begin to use porn as a way to cope and soothe and to survive our childhoods and even our adulthoods. And so what I say to guys is we got to bow to that little one, that inner child that needed the porn to survive and to be in complete and utter like acceptance and non-judgment. Because if we're in judgment of our use and we can't see how it's helped us to survive, then we can't actually change that behavior.
Mm.
Yeah.
So many side questions. Genius though. The
Mm.
the IFS is showing itself. I can hear it. Um,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of things here. I look back on three failed engagements,
Hmm.
and I see the traces personally of pornography. I read The Game by Neil
Yep.
Strauss, and
Did you read The Truth yet?
I did. I loved The Truth. Yeah, for
So
years.
good. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
yeah, it's genius, man.
I know.
A- and the sad fact of the matter is he ended up divorcing that woman.
Oh, whoa. Really?
Yeah, yeah. So even he didn't have it, but he had much better. He had a much better cut on it
Yeah.
in the second book. And like, so I read the first book and I was stuck between this, well, to fully self-express the male nature, I must be in an open relationship, but I also desire intimacy. And so I was on this confusing merry-go-round. And that sort of oscillation survived even through profound relational, emotional, spiritual training, but it got smaller,
Hmm.
right? And then in relationship, it was a like, well, let's open the relationship. Oh, no, actually not. And then choosing partners who were avoidant attached. I consider casual sex to be a deactivation strategy
Hmm.
for an avoidant attached nervous system. So also with polyamory
Hmm.
for most of the time. I don't think it's impossible for someone to have casual sex and it be aligned and nourishing and actually healthy for them. I just think the great majority of circumstances seem to point to something going on because I look at these partners and these relationships that failed and I say, okay, well, they were avoidant attached. I was anxious attached. I hadn't diagnosed this. And they were reaching for the emotional nutrition under the guise of sex without even admitting it to themselves, which is what I was also doing. And then
Hmm.
we would end up in a situationship, and then I would fall in love, and then I would get engaged, and then it would break off because the intensity of the intimacy was too much for their nervous system to actually hold and handle. All of which to say, I grew up for 4 to 5 years using porn before an interaction with a woman.
Hmm.
And I agree, we must opt out of it.
Hmm.
We're being used, abused, manipulated, distorted, deformed, defanged.
Yeah.
That I don't know if there's actual empirical data on this, but I walk around saying because it feels true that there are powers that would rather have us have empty balls and full stomachs than full balls and empty
Yeah.
stomachs, because then we'd be a threat to the illusions and the delusions of the modern world. We'd be the powerful
Oh,
nature that we are.
100%, because there are governments, I think it was South Korea. Mm, anyways, when there was a grassroots movement to come and to challenge the government, they didn't have pornography, but then they just turned it back on, and that was how they diffused that charge and that grassroots movement.
Wow.
Yeah.
Actual political revolution was put down
Hmm.
through the use of pornography.
Yep.
Wow. Has that happened in multiple places, or is this just this one country?
Something I read 2 years ago. It might not have been South Korea, but I think it was either Seoul or Taiwan or somewhere in that neighborhood where there was something that bubbled up. I'd have to go back and research it. But yeah, it was shocking to see that the government can control through, as you say, defanging by letting porn be available when it wasn't available up to that point. They were yeah. So yeah, it's definitely used as a tool.
Which also leads to the suggestion and the suspicion that there's a lot of men out there who would actually be nourished, like truly in an aligned, deep, rich way, by monogamy, who are being pulled off course by the oversensitization of their dopamine system through the use of porn. And then they're not actually available for the depth of commitment or intimacy that they would get if they were in that. So then
Mhm.
you find people in relationships and cheating, or in relationships dissatisfied sexually. One of
Yep.
my mentors, he says, most spiritual and relational needs are infected or contaminated by unmet emotional and spiritual needs.
Mm.
So I'm curious what you think about all of those.
Yeah. Say it to me one more time.
Oh, yeah. So that most sexual and relational needs are contaminated by camouflaging e- emotional and spiritual needs that
Yeah.
are going unmet.
Yeah, so the way I teach it is that there is an amoral animal inside of us, and then there's a moral human soul and spirit, and we're both and we're both an animal and we're also having a spiritual journey. And so when I think about this, I think about your comment earlier about yeah, sort of um, this drive to find multiple, partners or people attractive. And so what I want to say is like our biology has different intentions than our soul. And what I mean specifically is that, they've proven this with rats. It's the Coolidge effect. If you
Yeah.
ejaculate, it's like after a number of times you begin to seek a new novel mate, so that biological drive to procreate um, often is what causes so much infidelity, the desire for opening relationships, and all of that. And then you also have the soul, the spirit that, for some couples, they choose to go deep instead of going wide. They go deeper and deeper and deeper into that alchemical process of shedding these egoic layers and becoming more and more whole in who they were designed to be at a soul level. And so the way around this for me personally is like with my partner, I've seen this to be true. In fact, her and I have had these discussions all the time. If I'm ejaculating too often, regularly, and I love this woman, I'm so deeply committed and devoted to her forevermore. But if I do that and we walk out into the world, and I'm holding her hand, even my head's on a swivel, I start looking at new novel mates. And I'm able to talk to her about that because this is my line of work. But if I am really like honing in that and I'm doing semen retention and we're making love without ejaculation, then if I'm not ejaculating for the majority of the time that we, are making love, then when we go out into the world, I am not scanning for a new novel mate because I am so deeply enthralled into this love and this connection. And so, last point, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts is like, for me, it's a once a month thing on the moon cycle. It's an intentional release And then we spend a few days without going into the world where we're still just connecting and integrating that experience and then kind of going back in. And that's really what I see to be a way around that biological drive that doesn't care even if you found your soulmate or your devotional partner.
Brilliant. I love this conversation because what you're implying is the assumption that we ought to follow the animal drive. It reduces us to that animal. It
Mhm.
and it. I mean, you look at the rat in the cage.
Yeah.
Compulsively reinforcing pushing for cocaine, for
Mhm.
example, and it destroys them like
Yep.
eventually. So we must transcend biology in order to thrive, and this salience being dialed up or down, sort of a dial that gets shifted based on dopamine driven orgasm or not, it seems like rationally.
Yeah.
It seems like the system you've crafted is a really great response to the danger of us falling prey to the least of what's available in our sexual nature. And yeah, it also struck me from another couple angles as you were talking that commitment and the cultivation of depth with one person,
Mhm.
it literally is like a training ground for dharma, purpose, and service.
Yeah.
Like instead of routing our energy into multiple directions, we as men route our energy through our partner like a lens, focusing like the lens when you get the magnifying glass between the sun and the ground, like it
Mhm.
heightens and sharpens and strengthens the force of that energy flowing through. It's like, I'm sure you've read David Data. Woman is a slingshot through appearance and the way of the superior man, all of that. Like she's actually nothing
Yeah.
but appearance, and what we really seek is the spiritual underneath. And in this case, it's not quite that. It's more like my capacity for devotion to my purpose and not drawing it away and being distracted can get developed. And I'm curious if this is your actual experience, because for me, it's a pretty hypothesis. And I mean, it kind of matches the data, but I've never been clean of porn. I'm about 40 days in, and
Mhm.
there's no desire anymore. So I'm just like, huh, yeah, I'm noticing. Well, we'll get to what I'm noticing, but like as you anchor in to your partner through that oxytocin system, do you find personally, have you noticed in your people who you serve that their capacity for devotion to service, purpose, and dharma is strengthened?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And just to make sure I'm understanding your question, is my relationship with my partner in the devotion and the oxytocin and vasopressin and serotonin that's flowing through, does that create a frequency that helps me to guide my clients? Is that what you're asking?
A frequency that helps you to stay on the path of your purpose and service.
True, yeah. So the moment that I started to announce to my men's group, like, hey, I'm I'm gonna support men in their pornography. The moment that I began saying that was this, there was an accountability system in that because I can't lead anybody where I haven't gone before.
Yeah.
Also, before I met my partner Minta, my fiance, I did 2 years and 9 months of chosen celibacy.
Hmm.
It's a very long time to have no leaky energy and no women in my life that I was pulling in. It was just going to be a year, but I got to a year and I was like, I need more. My love addiction is still here. I need to continue. I also did a year of sobriety during that first year of celibacy. And so I've taken pauses on my um, releasing and during that 2 years and 9 months, I was releasing once a month. So
Hmm.
it wasn't like I was just not ejaculating because to me it's an important thing. But my I would say my greatest contribution to men is helping men to develop a mindful masturbation practice.
Hmm.
So if we're not going to watch pornography, if you look at NoFap, like the idea of NoFap, no fap, the sound of masturbation is fap, but the word no means stop, right? So stop masturbating. So you can see just the subtle shaming of masturbation in that whole movement of millions of men that are doing this NoFap thing. So for me, I'm like, all right, that's not the point. Like the point is how do we move from using sexuality as a means to feel better to a means to better feel? And that's really the jump. And that jump ultimately is about rewiring through having a mindful masturbation practice. And what I mean by that is like first acknowledging and grieving the fact that we had no elder guidance in what is sex, what is masturbation, what is this about. But then it's about being in beginner's mindset of cultivating and setting up your own practice. And so one of the things that I've done, and I'm happy to send it to you, is I've developed a guided mindful masturbation practice for men. So it's a woman who reads it, but it's effectively a guided practice where you put on headphones, you put on an eye mask, and instead of thinking your way to orgasm with your eyeballs, you, excuse me, you turn inwards and you begin to feel your way to orgasm through the somatic experience of really cultivating a deeper relationship with your body and moving out of the mind and into the felt sense of it. So the work for me is helping men to really take their pleasure practice seriously and to treat their penis with kindness, love, and care, and not just use and abuse it, and their life force as well. And that's a whole identity shift. It's a whole alchemical melting process that a man goes through, and that ultimately it's about self-healing and self-initiation.
Hmm.
And it does take a strong character and a strong sense of self to move through that process, but it's so worth it because on the other side of that, we now have become a completely different lover. And then when we do attract a partner, or we already have her or him, whoever it might be, then we can show up into that lovemaking experience without that goal oriented, orgasm focused type of adrenaline style sex, but really just about connecting. And then we're not so focused on ejaculation being the end. And we also can teach ourselves how to edge and how to last as long as we want. And we don't get fixated on that release. So, anyways, that was a lot. I'll pause, but I'm curious your thoughts.
Man, so good, so cool. So moving in the direction of like how to support men in or inspire them to uh, let go of porn use. Like one of the things I have encountered myself is if you go the full route of NoFap or semen retention, there can be a asceticism,
Mhm.
like a monk mode,
Yep.
where it's like the overpendulation from use and abuse to dismissal and divorce from pleasure
And repression.
and repression. It's like a return to even that Catholic kind of, I grew up Catholic,
Yep.
sexual repression, and you can't do it. And it can even be characterized in the language of like high performance
Yep.
or like like hey, you've got better focus, better creativity, stronger presence with women, all these things. And I'll notice those around 10 days in or 20 days in, and I'll be like, all right, I want to keep this. And
Hmm.
then it'll turn into an avoidance. But recently, around when I got to day 30, I was really turned on by a woman who I had been talking to. And so I self-pleasured.
Hmm.
Once per month actually accords with Taoist wisdom
Yep.
and my empirical observation. And what I love about your mindful masturbation sort of suggestion, and then yeah, let's share that with my people in the
Hmm.
description, is like it gives a root for the expression of that desire and um, that instinct, and also sets a watermark for like, okay, maybe don't ejaculate every day because it has an impact. Maybe once per month. And I'm not certain that the mindful masturbation is inclusive of orgasm or if it's instructive, directive towards like just more sensual with the self
Yeah.
oxytocin. You tell me.
It's choose your own adventure. I
Oh,
mean, you every man's a little different. I did 8 months of no masturbation or no ejaculation, and I found that after 90 days, my actual energy started to deplete. It didn't actually continue to keep rising. And so I lost a lot of my creativity and it felt like it was waning. And so full spermatogenesis is 90 days. And so my sense is every man's a little different depending upon their testosterone levels. And so from a Taoist perspective, if you do the Montauk Chia, it's like based upon age, and that's just silly to me. If I'm working with a client, I'm going to have them do blood work and I'm going to look at their testosterone levels and their age. And then I'm going to say, all right, let's create a specific kind of, target for you. And that might be once a week, depending upon his age and his testosterone. It could be once every 2 weeks on the moon cycles. It could be once a month. Or those guys that want to go a little longer, go every 90 days. And, when I am going to conceive a child with my fiance, once we're married, I'm for sure going to do full 90 days before we attempt to do that because I want my body to be at full life force capacity. I want my sperm to be in full maturity as it's making its way to create a child. So that's kind of my take on it. And then as far as the science, for those of you who are out there going, I don't know if I'm buying into this, just go to ChatGPT, go to Claude, whatever you use, and just type in what is my sperm and my seminal fluid made out of? What you'll see is it's proteins, vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and sugars, and it's quite a lot of them. And when we ejaculate that too much, too fast, too soon, and that's leaving, our body has to pull that from the rest because it's an automatic function. So it's going to pull it from our tissues, our brain, our body, our nervous systems, our blood in order to reproduce that. And so if we're doing that too much, of course, that makes us lethargic and drained. And so that's why it's important to do this sparingly. Like from a Taoist lens, they'll say that one drop of semen is equivalent to 30 drops of blood. And so whether that's true or not, that's old wisdom. And I think there's something to it though. And not everybody gets super depleted. Some people get more activated when they ejaculate, but at the same time, most men get depleted. And so there's also one other thing, or there's one other point on this. There's two different types of arousal systems. Some men are watching pornography to get up because they're depressed, they're laying in bed, and so they're using it to get aroused and they're not ejaculating, but they're using porn to like get shit done. And then other men are using it when they are triggered and now they're stressed and now they're doing it to regulate and down regulate. So some people upregulate with it, some people down regulate with it. And so just like naming that everybody's a little different with why they're choosing to use it. Yeah.
I love all the subtleties and
Mm-hmm.
distinctions that are arising in this conversation. I mean, the idea of getting someone's ideal frequency of ejaculation via blood work and scientific specificity, that's chef's kiss.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you can always tell when something's true, like when there's a body of wisdom in someone speaking, when it starts to connect the dots and constellate patterns of data.
Mm-hmm.
I look back over my past 10 years. My first time probably intending to stop using porn was like 2020, or excuse me, 2012.
Mm-hmm.
I remember leaving the Landmark Forum and like, all right, and I could feel that there was an energy that I was incorporating, that I was embodying, that got diminished. And arguably, for people who are doing personal development, raising their vibration, so to speak, or just shifting their physiology in really meaningful, semi-permanent ways through retreats, through live events, like one way for the ego to run and hide and resist. What is it? Marianne Williamson quote: "Our greatest fear is actually that we are greater than we think we are." Like, and we're running from that greatness. Like the ego, my observation was the ego would reset through ejaculating to porn and reinitiating an experience of powerlessness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh yeah, actually I'm not the person who I just became or who I think I am now. And that's more psyche level, but physiology and energy level, I think there was like a running out, like a
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree.
and so like do you have more on that? I don't want to if you've got more to say.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, the more you do Qigong and Taoist style meditations and energy work, and the more you're attuned to that, the more you'll understand and experience the subtle energetics of ejaculation. I'll give you a great example. I had a mercury filling when I was a child, and it kind of damaged some of the nerves in my face, and my face was twitchy for a number of years. And as I've done detox and started to take trace elements and trace minerals, and raise my testosterone levels and my hormones have started to stabilize, my face has become a lot more soft. And when I ejaculate, consciously, mindfully, usually it's still pretty stable. But if I do it too much, if I ejaculate twice in 2 or 3 days, all of a sudden my nervous system starts to wig out again and my breathing isn't good. And I look at my sleep scores and my nervous system starts to not feel stable. And so most men, because they've not had a parasympathetic baseline nervous system state, it's foreign when they get into that flow state where they feel good because they've normalized being in that sympathetic charge all the time. So once you've reached a baseline of I feel safe in my own experience in my own body, I feel still, my nervous system's calm, you can really feel the chi that relieves or that leaves when we ejaculate too frequently and how that dysregulates and creates disturbances. And in addition to that, when you look at orgasm in a brain scan, they've done this MRIs, it's as potent as taking a hit of heroin. And there's a book called Cupid's Poison Arrow. Have you heard of this book?
No.
It's a book about Carezza. Carezza is just making love without ejaculation. And basically it's the brain science and an anthropologist look at culture and different religions and them warning, hey, use ejaculation sparingly because of a number of reasons, one of which being conflict in relationships. And I've noticed that when I ejaculate too much, I am much more prone to be irritable with my boys, with my partner, and there's just more conflict. Whereas if I don't ejaculate, I am far more resourced to be able to handle challenging things and have nervous system spaciousness in order to tackle the moment and to meet the moment and whatever the task is.
There's I appreciate you so deeply. Because again, with the connecting of the dots, I've also experienced that. It's
Yeah,
like a readiness to be in conflict with the world, or like a raised trigger happiness, if that makes sense, like more reactive. It's and like it's upregulated after ejaculation. Sort of like maybe there's like a biological or psychological weakness that has arisen, and so there's like the psyche sort of reshapes as if to start shadow boxing when maybe there's going to be actual a threat because we're not actually able physiologically to hold our own or
hmm
energetically. And then
hmm
what you also said about qigong, I recently started. I'm almost finished a qigong teacher training.
great.
And so as I've been practicing each and every day, and Qigong, it's been hunting me for like 10 years. First, it was Taylor Johnson and his sexual semen retention
Yeah,
course.
he's a friend of mine. He's
Yeah,
cool.
awesome guy. And then it was like Qigong through freaking Brendan Burchard and high performance coaching, like as a way of breaking up the day and the flow of focus. And then last year I was just like, you know what, let me investigate this. And over the past year, I've had a distinct difficulty finding sexual partners. And what I mean by that is I actually am choosing better than I used to,
Mm,
even 2 or 10 years ago. But there's all this programming because I started socially awkward, sexually suppressed, introverted, diagnosed with autism. And so I went from suppression to overly expressed, my Casanova period.
sure.
It's like, oh, I deserve to give free rein to this impulse, this desire, novelty, variety, adventure. And I built a persona and I conditioned my body, actually, my nervous system, I think, to hunt and hunger and seek and search in certain
Mm,
ways. And then from sexual suppression to expression, now seeking exquisite alignment. Like, what is the
mm,
right perfect sensation and the right righteous, so to speak, use of the energy per moment. And I find that people can even in relationship, they can misuse sexual energy. They can
mhm.
still be using their partner to downregulate or upregulate, which establishes a subtle codependence, or it
Yeah,
did for me.
yeah.
And so now looking at relationship and how do I thrive in relationship? Well, there's a proper positioning. And I look at all my attempts over the past 15 years to like complete the cycle of renewing neurologically. Because my understanding is it's somewhere between 3 and 6 months, right? From last use of porn for the whole system to shift?
Yeah. Yeah. 90 days is usually minimum,
Huh.
depending upon where you're where you're at and are you mixing? You know, some people just watch porn, other guys mix with cannabis or ape or other types of drugs, and so they have more difficult times with their reboot.
Yeah, and then there's the way that the algorithm feeds softcore porn
Yep.
into men's minds that they then have to mitigate against, or I can even look in the past at like images of my former partners
Hmm.
that I possessed that would
Yep.
turn me on, and then I would jerk off, I would ejaculate, and that circuit would get reactivated even though it wasn't hardcore red tube porn. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. What I call or what I teach is what's called burning the boats. Burning the boats is getting rid of all pornographic material, especially ones that include your ex.
Hmm.
I think that number one, it's non-consensual, at
Huh.
least for me, to
Yeah.
be pulling at a soul or spirit level an ex back into a sexual experience when obviously there's a breaking point and when the relationship's moved on. So when guys are doing that, there's no shame in that. It's just sometimes a lack of awareness. I used to do it all the time, both with fantasy and looking at imagery. So when you burn the boats, you're deleting all of that porn and all of that stuff. And I just say to guys, hey, just go in there. Don't look at it again. Don't masturbate one more time. Just let it go. By saying no to that, what you're actually saying is yes to the universe to bring you a truly aligned partner. Because anytime you're going back and masturbating to something that's not aligned, you're communicating to the universe that I'm not ready for my soul aligned partner. And so it's less about holding any shame around it and more about like, I trust that there is a divine plan for this partner who's out there doing their work and they're looking for me as I'm looking for them. And I need to get 100% in integrity within my sexual energy and not leaking it into the past in order for me to be ready for that divine light, secure functioning partnership to happen. And this also includes going into your algorithm and clicking not interested and all of those things and unfollowing everybody and deleting all of those old phone numbers and literally clearing it all out. I've gone as far as deleting Instagram and Facebook off my phone. Like,
Huh.
it's not to say that I don't, my algorithms are clear, they're clean. It's not like bombarding me with sexual imagery anymore, but just being pulled into dysregulation and all of the Epstein files and everything was just too much for me. And so if I make a post, I literally upload the app onto my phone, takes 30 seconds. I make a post, I delete it again, and then I'll check everything on my Instagram or on my Facebook on my desktop. And I've just cleared out my time, my energy to be redirected into creativity and into like what actually matters. So there are some things that we just have to be aware of because softcore pornography does activate us and pull us into real pornography. And what I teach also is what I call outgrowing a pornographic mindset. So if a pornographic mindset is seen through the front of the eye and kind of being in that like go get kind of energy, what I'll do is I had a No Nut November. There was 100 guys in that container. And so what we did was we were all on screen together and I had them pull up their phone and find somebody who they were attracted to, like somebody that they like objectify. And so we did two experiments. The first was for 2 minutes. I put a song on, look at this individual and just part them out, objectify, like be in that predator mindset, go for it, look at their body in whatever sexualized way you want. And then we took a breath, cleared it out, shook it out, and then look again, but now look at their eyes, bring them in through the back channel into the heart and humanize this person. They're a soul, they have a name, they're a mom, they're whatever, like create a story that like really humanizes them. And by doing this, we then talked about it. And there was guys that were in tears. There were guys like, oh my God, that was so impactful just to be able to see differently because we don't realize how porn kind of programs us.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are some things that can be really helpful to try. And then why I teach this is then you're not just trying to play whack-a-mole, trying to keep your algorithm clean or trying not to see porn at all, like browser blockers and all this is like To be truly free is to be able to engage with life and what arises, but to have control of your endocrine system and your nervous system so that if you do see something that is arousing, you can humanize that individual and be in control and in presence with your arousal system and to be able to breathe through that and to move on. And so that's true freedom from porn and pornographic mindset versus like trying to, create repression and browser blockers.
Man, I I'm gonna have to re-listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
The information density and the quality of the distinctions that are coming through just top notch. It's clear your expertise here. Do you have some flex space or you got a hard stop?
I do, unfortunately. Yeah, I have another call at 10, so
Well, you're invited back. Would you like to continue this conversation?
I'd love to. Yeah, it'd be great.
Beautiful. That there's so much like from Ayurvedic testosterone increasing supplements to the extension of social media addiction and its overlap with porn addiction and eliminating lust and yeah, there's
Yeah, and
so much.
mindful masturbation, lasting as long as you want in the bedroom, becoming multi-orgasmic. Sort of part of it is this, the shame and the secrecy, silence and speed and all that that's porn. And then it's like, well, why are we doing this? Because this other way of love making is just so worth it. And so if we can have a vision of what is possible, then we can be dedicated to walking that path and moving through it.
Man, it's a perfect tee up for you and your work. How can people find more of you? Like where's
Yeah.
the next step?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Tyson Adams. On Instagram, Tyson Adams with two underscores. I'm in the process of building an app. It's called Life Force. It's literally an app dedicated to helping men outgrow porn. I'm going to have all kinds of modules in there. There's going to be breath work and somatic practices to help men work through this. And I'm also building mindful masturbation practices that can be unlocked so that you can actually rewire these programs. So I'm really, really excited about that. It's going in development next month, but the design's there. So I don't have like a website or a landing page or anything really to showcase in this moment, but just DM me, follow me, and feel free to reach out. I'm very approachable, happy to jump on connection calls for men that are ready to tackle it. If you're ready to do the work, if you want to get into working with me for 12 weeks, I'm here and I'm damn good at what I do. So, yeah.
No doubt. No doubt, man. Um, Last question. What do you recommend that's most powerful? Just a little soundbite for someone who is in the process and making progress around
Yeah.
letting go of pornography.
Yeah. Um, put down your phone.
Hmm.
You live in a part of the world where springtime is coming. Wait for a sunny day and go out and reconnect your sexuality into nature.
Huh.
Yeah. Move
The-
out of the mind and into the sensations of the sun on the body and find a new way to experience pleasure that isn't driven by all of that high dopaminergic stuff. Just slow it down and develop a relationship with your body and your breath that allows for you to teach yourself a new way of being ultimately.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And with that, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you all
Thank
for
you, Lewis.
listening. And blessings, sir. Looking forward to talking to you again.
Yeah. Me as well.
All right.
Okay.
Peace.